Our next guest speaker that we are very glad to welcome is Carlos Hopkins, who currently serves as Virginia's Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs, the state's top official for coordinating state and federal resources to support Virginia's veteran community and serve as a liaison with the federal defense facilities. He was appointed to his current position on September 1st by Governor Terry McAuliffe after serving the previous 3 years as counsel to the governor, where he advised the governor on the impact that current federal and state law may have on the governor's policy proposals. Secretary Hopkins is a graduate of the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina, where he graduated with a degree in political science with a concentration in law and criminal justice, and he received his law degree from the University of Richmond School of Law. His career has spanned many things, including working at a small firm in the city of Richmond, handling insurance defense cases and federal court-appointed matters, serving as a prosecutor in the Richmond Commonwealth Attorney's Office, where as a deputy Commonwealth Attorney, he supervised the office's narcotics and Project Exile prosecutions, managing a solo practice, serving as the training director for the newly restructured Virginia Indigent Defense Commission, the state agency that manages Virginia's public defender system, and working in the Richmond City Attorney's Office as a deputy city attorney, with practice areas focused on tax assessment and eminent domain litigation, as well as public safety. After Governor McAuliffe was elected to be Virginia's governor, Secretary Hopkins was tapped to be the governor's counsel in January 2014. In addition to his civilian legal experiences, he's also a lieutenant colonel in Virginia's National Guard, where he currently serves as the chief legal advisor to the Adjutant General of Virginia. He has nearly 27 years of service in the Reserve and Guard forces of the U.S. as a judge advocate and former enlisted soldier. And from July 2008 to July 2009, he deployed to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where he served as the Chief of Military Justice as part of Joint Task Force Guantanamo. I wish we could hear about that too. That would be fascinating. So please welcome Secretary Hopkins. Thank you.
Everything's classified in Guantanamo. It's always interesting when they read the part about I went to the Citadel. I listened for either the West Point or the other academy grads to hear the or in this case, the VMI folks, some of whom I work with on a daily basis. Mike Coleman, who's one of my military liaisons, reminds me constantly how much better VMI is than the Citadel. And then I remind him constantly that I'm still secretary. So we have a nice balance going. But it's very good to be with you this afternoon. And I'm happy to share with you what we're doing here in Virginia with our Department of Veterans Services and our foundation, and what we're doing to assist here in the Hampton Roads region, and how we're working collaboratively with, I see many military personnel here, and I know many of you are retired, but what we're doing to work with our active duty folks, our retirees, of all of our veterans. You know, though I must admit, each time I come back to William & Mary as a Citadel grad, I have these flashbacks to former tribe quarterbacks launching missiles against my poor Bulldogs, and that's all I remember seeing in the stands. And as soon as I think I've gotten over it, I get invited back for some event like this. So it'll take me another few years to recover from this experience, but we'll see how I do. You know, when the governor asked me to serve as the Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs following Admiral Harvey, one, I told him it's the first time you followed a 4-star with a colonel, so I appreciate the promotion. But it was also perhaps one of the great highlights of my life to this point. As a 27-year veteran myself and still serving, and the grandson of a Korean War veteran and the son of a 30-year retired sergeant major, the issues impacting our veterans are very personal to me and very important. And so it was an extreme honor to be given this opportunity to continue to serve those who've served us. More than any other state, the impact that our veterans community has on Virginia and the impact of the military presence here is probably greater than any other state in our country. And I'm talking, that includes Texas and California and Florida, states that are much more populous. But here in Virginia, many of you may have heard these numbers. We have the fastest growing population of veterans in the country. We have roughly 10% of our population consist of veterans. We have the highest per capita percentage of veterans in the nation. We have the highest percentage of women veterans in the nation. And we have the largest percentage of veterans under the age of 25 in our great country. We're home to the largest naval station in the world, of course. We're also home to the Pentagon. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar, yes, the Pentagon is in Arlington, Virginia, not Washington, D.C. And the governor will remind you of that if you ever say anything other than that. But we are also home to over 30 other state and federal installations. And that includes Dahlgren and, of course, the Norfolk Naval Station, Oceana, Fort Lee, Fort Belvoir, and many others. And the importance of that is that means that more than $53 billion a year come through the Commonwealth from the Department of Defense in terms of our funding, making up approximately 11% of our state's GDP. Our military retirees, one of the fastest growing populations in the nation, account for roughly $900 million in our state tax revenues. So what does this all mean? What it means is that Virginia has a significant impact on our national security because of our military assets, and that we all have an obligation, both in public service and in private service, to make sure we're taking care of those who are taking care of us. Since being appointed as the Secretary, I've been all over the Commonwealth, and just in the past week alone, I've been in D.C., I've been in Fauquier, I've been out to the Hampton Roads region, and I was corrected once when I took the appointment, and I said Tidewater. And they said, it's not Tidewater. That was 10 years ago. It's the Hampton Roads region. It's also not Rivanna Station, it's Rivanna Station. So 2 months in, I am still learning the terms of our great Commonwealth. But since being appointed, I've had the opportunity to visit many of our 29 veterans' offices and to talk with those persons who are having day-to-day contact with our veterans across the state, and to hear from them what is it that we can do as a state, what is it that I can do to reach out to our federal partners to make life better for them here in Virginia. And as I've said many times as I've traveled around our Commonwealth, the beauty of working in this sphere, in this space, is that veterans' issues are not partisan issues. I like to say they're not even bipartisan issues. They're nonpartisan issues. The governor, in fact, just yesterday we were in Fauquier County and we had the groundbreaking for the new Puller Veterans Care Center that's going to open in 2019. And he said there are no Republican veterans, there are no Democratic veterans, there are just veterans. They're just American citizens who have put on the uniform of our country and gone off to serve. And that's the approach that we take across my secretariat. Whatever your stripe, whatever your background, if you serve the nation, if you're a family member of someone who served, we're going to do everything that we can to provide you the resources that you need to have the best quality of life here in our Commonwealth. So what have we done here in Virginia to engage our veteran and active duty populations? And then I'll touch briefly on the theme that's brought every one of you here today. But I wanted to start by just showing you what the vast amount of resources and assets that are here in Virginia that are impacted by the very subject of sea level rise that you're talking about here today. So the Hampton Roads region, as many of you know, has one of the fastest growing populations of veterans in the state. Makes sense with the number of military installations here. And just a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to visit our Hampton Benefits Office. One office alone sees more than 12,000 persons on an annual basis. And that's just one office. And that number is increasing. This large number of veterans is one of the key reasons that our Federal Veterans Administration is looking to place another Veterans Care Center here in the Hampton Roads region. I had the chance to speak, and I know you heard from Representative Whitman earlier, but to talk to him and Representative Taylor, and as well as McEachin and Scott, about the funding for that new center. And across the entire delegation, everyone's on board with making sure that center comes here to Virginia and here in the Hampton Roads region. Now, there will be some discussions as to whether it's in Virginia Beach or in Chesapeake. I got to step back and say, I'll let you guys fight that out here in Washington, so long as we get it here in Virginia. But the collaborative effort across our state and federal partners is extremely strong in the veterans space. And so when we're talking about what is it that we can do to continue that effort, to continue growing the military mission here in Virginia, we look at some of the things that we've been doing at the state level. Since 2014, since Governor McAuliffe came in office, we've increased the number of veterans benefits offices from 22 to 29. In fact, the last office opened was here in Williamsburg just a few weeks ago. That was number 29. We're working hard to make sure that number 30 is there in the Pentagon. And we were asked by some of the delegates, well, why the Pentagon? What about the other 49 states? And I like to say, well, what about the other 49 states? We live in Virginia. But our veteran services reps don't serve just one state. Anyone coming to our offices, even if you've come to one of our Northern Virginia offices, is going to receive assistance to help walk that veteran through that process, the federal process. Our purpose is to help veterans, no matter where they're from, no matter what their background. And so we're hoping that by opening an office in the Pentagon for those transitioning service members who are getting ready to retire or having thoughts about what they should do next, they'll come see our folks and we can help walk them through that. Because again, our ultimate goal is to make sure that Virginia is the most veteran-friendly state in the nation. We also understand the importance of transitioning for our service members and their families. You know, through our V3 program, when we first came into this administration, the goal was to hit 5,000. Hire 5,000 veterans by the end of the administration. When that goal was reached, 3 years ahead of schedule, the goal was doubled, and then that was reached. So today, the Commonwealth of Virginia has helped to employ more than 28,000 veterans through our V3 program, our Virginia Values Veterans Program. And that number is still growing. And we will be well over 30,000 before the end of this administration. But it's also about our Transition Assistance Program, and making sure that for those persons who are getting ready to leave active duty, that we can provide them the resources and services they need as well. And so with each of our offices, we meet with the installation commanders through through DVS personnel. And we talk to them through VMAC, our Virginia Military Advisory Council, to find out what is it that the active duty installations need, what do the personnel need, what can we as a state do to help ease that transition for them. Virginia was and still is the only state in the nation to set up a military medics and corpsmen program. So one of the challenges that we've seen is as persons get ready to leave the military, the skills that they've learned don't always transition easily over onto the civilian side in some circumstances, when we're talking education. So what we want to do is make sure that if you've gained, which we know you have, certain skills on the military side, we have programs in place to make sure you get the appropriate credentials, the appropriate educational benefits, and appropriate licensing, so that transition is that much easier for you. And we do that through our Military Medics and Corpsmen program. We also do that through our VTAP program. But right here on this campus, we also have the new Center of Excellence, in which a person can get a Master's of Public Policy degree. And so that's another example of the collaborative effort between our educational institutions here in the Commonwealth, the state government, and the support that we get from the communities around to make sure that whatever our military personnel need, we're stepping in there to provide them those resources. Even though we've achieved a certain number of goals at the state level, there are still other issues that we have to be concerned about. And obviously, one is the threat of sea level rise. You know, when I came into this position, one of the first things I kept hearing was we need to grow the military mission in the Commonwealth. We need to prepare for future BRACs. And then we watched in Washington as they started discussing the NDAA and what impact, if any, that would have on the Commonwealth and our assets. And we know that any particular, well, BRAC has been pushed out for a little while. But now we think about, what about mission creep? What if they start reassigning assets to other bases, to other states? What is it that we can do to make sure that the Commonwealth is prepared? And one of the considerations that we know goes into that is the conditions of the very locations in which we hope these assets will remain. So when you start talking about sea level rise, and you start talking about flooding, and you start talking about those factors that DOD and Washington will look at to determine whether or not to relocate assets, that's a concern for us at the state level. It's not just a federal issue. And we think about where Joint Base Langley Eustis is located. We think about where the Naval Station, where Oceana's Naval Air Station is located. We think about the Naval Station Norfolk. And we think about the impact that sea level rise will have on it and what we can do as a Commonwealth to help address some of these issues. We know that, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that over the past 100 years, there's been approximately a 15-inch increase in the Hampton Roads area in terms of the sea level rise, which is the most on the East Coast. We know that stability of the coastlines from which our military launched their missions will change drastically over the years from sea level rise. And we know that these threats to our military infrastructure, as they play out over the century, will have strategic impact on the Commonwealth's ability to deter our own enemies, defend our assets, and to support our federal partners. But just as importantly, these threats have an impact on the continuation and the placement, as I indicated, of our future military assets. One of the things that we fought against early in administration is the relocation of certain carrier units, certain fighters. And if there's one thing the governor does not like to do, is to lose any competition to any other state. So if he hears that Florida or Maryland are potentially gaining assets from Virginia, I guarantee he will move heaven and earth to make sure that the resources are there so that doesn't happen. So these are things we're constantly looking at. I saw Kevin Felix in the back, and working with his group at the Matrix Group and with the Roosevelt Group, we make sure we stay in touch with our representatives in Washington to find out what we can do to assist them, to provide them information from the state level so they can make the arguments on our behalf in Congress. And we make them aware of what are the issues in the Commonwealth that we can bring to bear to make sure that we keep the assets right here in our Commonwealth, in particular in our Hampton Roads region. We're always looking for ways to promote the military assets that we have here in the Commonwealth. And that's one way in which we guard against the relocation of assets, against the potential of a future BRAC. For example, whether it's promoting Joint Base Langley-Eustis as a location for additional aircraft, if we're coordinating a regional partnership to ensure that the training airspace over the East Coast is expanded, or whether or not we're pushing for a greater cybersecurity mission for our 192nd Fighter Wing right here in Langley. It's important for us to address the concerns now so that we're not looking at another 100 years of possible sea level rise and sea level damage to our Commonwealth's assets. I know the Navy is now embarking on its own study into this very issue, and I know they're working with several of our localities, including Norfolk and Virginia Beach, to find ways to address the sea level rise and the erosion and the recurrent flooding that take place in each of those cities. The recommendations of the study could have far-reaching implications, and it's certainly going to help shape the development of the Hampton Roads region. It's not just a Navy issue, however. It's incumbent upon all of us to take these matters into consideration. And I know you have a panel coming up where persons much smarter than I am and certainly more knowledgeable of the science behind it will be addressing these issues more pointedly. But there are over 1.4 million people living in the Hampton Roads region, and we've got to work together as a region to find solutions to that. So I know from Rear Admiral Austin with the Coast Guard and Major General Funkhauser with the Army Corps of Engineers, they're all taking sea level rise into their considerations as they consider new construction projects. So as I prepare to close, I am greatly encouraged by what I see both from the Commonwealth in terms of what we're doing to be leaders on behalf of our veterans, and I'm encouraged by what I see from the partnerships and even from the collaboration of all of those here in this room who are interested in this very important topic, this vital topic to ensure the protection of our assets here in Virginia. And so I look forward to working with each and every one of you over the next either 2 months or 4 years, because it is, of course, election season, in case anyone missed that on the way coming in. And if there's anything that I or my office can do to assist you in this effort, please feel free to reach out to me. I thank you, and I hope that you have a great rest of the program. Thank you.